You know, I know, we all know that things have not been going as well for Aston Martin as this season has progressed as they were at the beginning, and as all the rest of the teams, quite frankly, have begun to catch up with their car developments. We've got Lance Stroll regularly crashing and not finishing, and yet still never looking like he's ever going to be fired. And now Fernando Alonso has dramatically changed his tune because the car is no longer competing at a level where he can consistently get podiums. Let's talk about what is going to happen next at Aston Martin. Let's start off by talking about the pink maple leaf in the room, because there are paid drivers and then there is Lance Stroll. Comment down below and let me know which driver you would put in Lance Stroll's seat, because at the moment it really does feel like anyone at all in their backup roster, let's say, would be a more effective choice. And at this stage, when you Google Lance Stroll Wikipedia, and I'm not even kidding, one of the top suggested alternative search results is what has happened to Lance Stroll. I kid you not. While Alonso has been gathering podiums as best he can this season, Lance has had a best fourth place finish and 3 retirements, along with enough crashes and errors in practice and quali sessions that I've lost count. And look, let's be honest about this. This is his 7th year in Formula One. And rather than seeing an improvement over that time, we've actually seen an overall decline in his performance levels, coupled with what seems to be a growing level of disdain, honestly, for the sport of F1 in general. You know, we've seen him in photos leaving driver briefings with AirPods in, not speaking to anyone. We've seen him looking very forlorn on the driver's parade, which is supposed to be like a bit of crack, and generally being a damp squib, let's be honest, in interviews. And look, this is not the same guy that we saw collecting 10 points finishing places and 3 podiums back in 2020. It's just not him for whatever reason. Right now, I don't know whether Lance Stroll really wants to be in that seat. I think maybe he just doesn't want to be doing anything else. And yet here we are in a scenario where in theory, Lance Stroll could actually stay at Aston Martin for as long as his father is in charge of the team, if he wanted to, because he's on a rolling contract. And, you know, despite concerns that have been raised over his level of performance, and indeed the additional cost of these crashes and these driver errors, there don't seem to be any signs of him being unseated. And it's an extremely frustrating scenario. I don't know about you, but it really irks me when I think of all the promising young drivers that are out there, not only queuing behind the existing Formula One drivers, but at this point queuing up behind each other, because there are so many of them, to get into an F1 seat. And then we have Lance Stroll. Moving on to Fernando Alonso. He's not happy, is he? He's not happy. He's gone from euphorically describing the car as lovely to drive, all the way down to grimly calling it undrivable, which is kind of the lowest of the low when a driver is talking about how they feel in the car. Alonso's currently on a multi-year deal at Aston Martin, and it's believed that runs out at the end of 2024. But if this lack of ability to compete continues through the rest of this season and into 2024, to be completely honest, I think that when his contract runs out, he's going to retire. For real this time, not the retire and come back. I really think, you know, he hasn't won an F1 race for a decade. And although he's been on the second step of the podium many times this season, he's not going to beat Max Verstappen in that Red Bull. He knows it, we all know it. And unless something very bizarre occurs at a Grand Prix and Alonso is there to snap it up, which of course has happened in the past, I don't think that Alonso's dream that I suppose he was holding on to at the beginning of the season of a wondrous return to winning in Formula One is going to happen at this point. And I wouldn't be surprised if he kept on racing after leaving Formula One. You know, perhaps he goes back to competing in the US, for example. But I just can't see him carrying on for much longer with a team that he knows isn't performing at the level that he wants it to. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think that Fernando Alonso has the stamina and the desire, more importantly, to carry on in Formula One beyond the end of the 2024 season? Let's move on from the drivers and talk about the car itself. I am not an F1 performance engineer, so I will not make any claims about the technical side of this Aston Martin in this video, but it seems pretty clear, even to the most casual of fans, that over the course of this season, the team has had one major issue, and that is the others have caught up. Essentially, the early performance of their car really was a bit of a red herring because they just happened to be early adopters. Not happened as in it was an accident, but out of the others, in comparison with the other teams around them, they were the early adopters. They were ahead of the curve with their car development, having gone in the right direction, whereas teams like Mercedes had gone in the wrong direction and had to pivot. Now, though, you have Ferrari and Mercedes who've got their act together. Mercedes is still a little bit inconsistent, but they're lurking enough to snatch points consistently so that both of them are now ahead of Aston Martin in the Constructors' Championship, which, even though it's already been won by Red Bull, does far from render it null and void, because there's an awful lot of money that's attached to that and the results by the end of the season. And meanwhile, McLaren are now just 50 points, less than 50 points actually, behind them, thanks to the huge strides that they're making with each of these new sets of upgrades. And essentially what those teams have done is they've swallowed up Aston Martin's early advantage and spat them out towards the back of the top 10 at times, which is understandably going to dent a team's morale when they spent the first few weeks, if not months, of the season celebrating consecutive podiums. As far as what happens next, I don't know what is next for Aston Martin, but it's clear for, them, just like Lewis said for Mercedes recently, they need to have the biggest 6 months of development that they've ever had in that team if they want to get anywhere near Red Bull, and they need to be realistic about which of their drivers has the ability to get them those kind of results, because in his current form, it isn't Lance Stroll. For all you women in motorsport trolls out there, I'm giving you a moment now to exit this video peacefully, because if your sensitivities do not allow you to listen to the topic of a future female Formula One driver being discussed, this is the time to leave, because I am going to be chatting about Jessica Hawkins, who has just become the first female in 4 years to complete an F1 test day with none other than Aston Martin. And I just have to say congratulations to her. If there's one silver lining in this video in relation to Aston Martin, it has to be that they are showing at least some level of investment in the future of a female Formula One driver. Personally, I love to see it. Thank you, as always, my friends, for watching, and make sure you're subscribed as well so that you never miss a new video when it drops weekly on my channel. Let me know in the comments what you think is going to happen with Aston Martin for the rest of the 2023 season and moving into 2024. Can they make it back near that top step of the podium, or do they just not have the firepower right now as far as the car and the drivers? As always, I will be hanging out with you all in the comments once this video goes live, but until then, take care and enjoy your racing.